You would think a big building like that would be very difficult to move. Remember, these people were operating industrial machinery. It was nothing to move that house for them. So I hear all kinds of stories about how they did it. One of the common stories is they put it on logs and rolled it to that location. Okay, I'm a scientist. That's what I do for a living. I've done for years. Nobody put that house on logs and rolled it to that location. That's a silly concept. Excuse me, just say that. Do you realize why that is ridiculous? For example, that soft earth, you put all those tons of wood on top of logs, and what's going to happen? It'd go nowhere. So they had to do it on rails, number one. That was absolutely necessary. The question is, what type of rail and how did they, manage to get up? Well, it had chimneys in it. Would you believe they moved it with the chimneys intact? But I think they took the tops off the chimneys, just as you saw, but they had to support it from down below. Adelia Rosasco-Soul was alive when we arrived here. We had many discussions with her about moving the house. And she was there when the house was moved. And she told us, well, I took music lessons from one of the Thompson women while the house was being moved. And she said the milk in the pantry didn't even shake as they moved the house. Although the walls are badly cracked and so forth, which you would expect even from the slightest movement, okay, would break those plaster walls. There are cracks everywhere. They were able to do it. So the question is, how did they do it and what was the technique they used? Well, I heard several stories. The engineer who was responsible, his son died recently. His story was they put it up on railroad trucks, just as you would see under a train, okay? And you remember the mill at that time had a turntable. So they had to turn the house around. So they put it up on railroad trucks, moved it onto the turntable, and turned it around. And then they pulled it over to rails to move it in the direction where it is now. Well, I don't know how, here's another story. I have zero evidence, except this man said his father did that. Okay, fine, he did that. Then how did they move it? And it took a long time to move it. Who knows what a capstan is? Want to tell us?
It's a turntable with arms that stick out that men get on, and it cranks around with ratchets.
Yeah.
And they hoist sails and rigging and so on.
Yeah, they raise anchors and raise and load anchors on ships. So, in effect, it's a big pulley. And that's how they moved it. They had a big pulley attached to this thing on wheels or whatever it is, on rails. So, what operated the pulley? Adelia said they had a monkey. I couldn't help that. They had a donkey. They had a donkey walking in a circle. And the donkey operated the capstan. He just walked in a circle. So how long did it take to wind up that big house? Weeks and weeks and weeks. It didn't happen. And that's when she was there in the house taking her music lessons while the donkey walked in a circle until it ended up in its present position. Of course, there was a lot more work involved. And there was a second building that traveled also. Okay? And then they decided they needed another kitchen, so they built that kitchen. And then remember in the old days, they had bathrooms in the house? And then they decided they need bathrooms, so they had those. So the back part of the house is a hodgepodge of whatever was attached at any given point in time, depending on what the need was. So that, when they moved it, that's when this was cut out for the assembly process. Have I answered your questions?
John, I have a comment. The influence of the Thompson family goes all the way to the airport. Would you like to talk just briefly about Harry Thompson?
Okay.
And we have in this book an excerpt about him.
One of William Henry's sons, Harry Thompson, who is not Jones' father, but the father of Camille Thompson, Daniels Patterson, who was executor or executrix. That was her father. And during the First World War, he was very much involved with the development of aviation in this area and was famous for that. And so that's the book that you have there. Yes. So he was the grandson of Benjamin Woodson Thompson. Yes?
In digging around in your yard, did you ever come across what you thought was the location of the detached kitchen to the original house?
No, the detached kitchen was well back on the mill site property. It was located there. The reason they had detached kitchens is reasonably obvious. Fires. So that they kept them separated. The bedroom that Patricia and I use is the detached kitchen right now. The boys having to go upstairs. And the big fireplace is still there that was used to cook the meals. Yes, dearie?
You need to mention about how we got with the Civil War.
Oh yeah, I didn't tell that story. The story's been told so many times. When the Union soldiers were in the house during the Civil War, they scrawled on the walls messages to the Thompson family, in effect telling the Thompsons they were there. So over the years, we have been able to find a good deal of information about those soldiers, and we now have photographs on the walls of 3 of the officers that were there, as well as their leader. Their leader's name was Sperling. He later went on to become a major general. And they, in effect, just left messages on the walls to the Thompson family saying, hey guys, we were in your house, yeah, we're going to win the war. Okay, that's literally what they're doing, okay? And you should also know that many people in Baghdad were in the Union Army, as well as in the Confederate Army. So why were they in both armies? Well, if someone burned your home, you wouldn't appreciate it either. All right? So they were in both armies. And you know many people here who had relatives, their great-grandfathers were in the Union armies. Yes?
I was just wondering if those troops that came from Rancus going to Mariana, for the Battle of Mariana, came through here.
They were all part of that same Union group, led by Sperling. He was the leader and the field leader. He's a famous guy. And I'm actually putting together a book on his history and so forth. And the big problem I have right now is I have to go to Washington, I have to go to Cranberry Isles, Maine, and I have to go to Chicago, Illinois in order to finish it, because he was in all of those places. He was a very famous marksman. He did some fascinating things. You remember Annie Oakley? He could shoot that way. So when he was here, there are all kinds of stories about how he did what he did. And that's another issue another day.
We just found some of our relatives that made that march.
Did you, well, there you are.
Just recently.
There are so many people here that have that kind of, you remember after the Civil War, the Union soldiers stayed here for a good long time. And the major reason they stayed here is because so many people were in the Union Army here. If they had departed, it would have been a massacre. Would have been a massacre, because the Confederates coming back were not exactly happy, and they would have fought the war again. And later Congress published something called the War of the Rebellion, which Nathan is very familiar with. And these are all of the dispatches from both sides during the Civil War. And one of the major reasons they published those dispatches was, we're talking about tall tales. Boy, those old soldiers could tell the tall tales. And they would start to fight the war again on the basis, oh no, it didn't happen that way. Oh yes, it. Congress published all the records. And you can read about everything that happened here. If you go to the War of the Rebellion, it's found in the University of West Florida Library Special Collections. Part of it's online now, and you can read. So everything that I know about what happened here, I'm reading about what someone else wrote. Go.
There were a lot of photographs of the Civil War, so why weren't there any photographs of this man?
I do not know why. I do not know why. Sorry. His family does not have photographs of him. All right, so this is a composite of photographs that did exist of his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. But I'm reasonably sure that's darn close. Okay.
I think it's remarkable. I do.
Thank you all very much. Oh, we got another one?
We're from the Holly area, in Washington, 2, Bragg and Bragg. There was a mill in East River, the mouth of East River, that William Miller, who was General William Miller, it was burned, and he burned it, and he became famous later because he fought at the Battle of Natural Bridge and saved the only capital in the South from burning, which was Tallahassee. And again, was awarded a pension in 1906 by the legislature. Became famous. And he is from our area.
May I tell you something about pensions, if I may go